Before we get started with our lesson, I wanted to remind you that we've talked about what led up to the American Revolution. There was two events, the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. And then with yesterday's lesson and today's lesson, we're thinking about what caused the American Revolution. So yesterday you talked about the first shots fired at Lexington and Concord, and today we're going to be talking about how the colonists took over Fort Ticonderoga but lost it to the Battle of Bunker Hill. And then we're also going to be thinking about how the British left Boston, but most of the colonists felt independent. Early battles. In the picture, you have a famous painting showing colonists fighting British soldiers at the Battle of Bunker Hill. 3 weeks after the battles took place in Massachusetts, a young New Englander named Benedict Arnold led a militia force toward Fort Ticonderoga. This was a British fort on Lake Champlain in New York. News traveled slowly in the 1700s. Therefore, the British at Fort Ticonderoga did not know about the events at Lexington and Concord. So I want you to be thinking about if this were to happen today, they would have known about the events at Lexington and Concord because of all of the technology we have. But back then, news traveled by runners on horses, so it wasn't as fast, obviously. They had no idea about the events that had taken place. Ethan Allen. Arnold planned to capture the cannons at Fort Ticonderoga and take them to the colonial army camped near Boston. His force joined those of another New Englander, Ethan Allen. Allen's troops, the Green Mountain Boys, were militia from the area that is now Vermont. Early on, May 10, 1775, Allen's men sneaked into Fort Ticonderoga. They surprised the guards, capturing the fort without firing a shot. The Battle of Bunker Hill. In June, back in Boston, British General Thomas Gage decided to take control of the hills around Boston. That way, American cannons could not fire down into the city. But colonists learned of the plan. The colonial militia, led by Colonel William Prescott and General Israel Putnam, were ordered to defend Bunker Hill in Charleston across the Charles River from Boston. Instead, they decided to defend Breed's Hill, which was closer to the river. The colonists worked all night to build earthen walls for protection. The battle begins. On June 17th, British soldiers led by Major John Pitcairn crossed the Charles River in boats. They marched up Breed's Hill toward the earthen walls where colonists waited. The Americans did not have much ammunition or musket balls and gunpowder. Officers told them not to waste ammunition by firing at soldiers too far away. Historians say that either Prescott or Putnam said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes." So again, I want you to think about that part because that's going to come into play later on. Officers told them not to waste ammunition by firing at soldiers too far away. Historians say that either Prescott or Putnam said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes." What could that mean? A British victory. Twice the British charged up the hill. Both times they were turned back by American fire. Finally, the Americans ran out of gunpowder and musket balls. Peter Brown, an American soldier, described the third advance by the British troops. "When the enemy came in, I jumped over the wall and ran. Musket balls flew like hailstones and cannons roared like thunder." So they failed twice, but on that third one they succeeded. And this American was describing how he basically ran. The British won what was later called the Battle of Bunker Hill. More than 400 colonists were killed or wounded, but the victory was costly for the British. More than 1,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded. The British commander, Major Pitcairn, was one of many British officers killed that day. So again, we can add that to the list of British victories. However, they still lost a lot of soldiers and one of their commanders. A new year brings hope. Word of the high cost of British victory spread beyond Massachusetts. Many colonists came to believe that by working together, the colonies could win their freedom. As 1776 began, hopes were high that the revolution would be short and successful. And in this picture, we have colonial soldiers led by General Henry Knox dragged cannons from Fort Ticonderoga to Boston. The British leave Boston. Many colonists even found hope in the defeat at Bunker Hill. The British had won, but the Americans had fought hard. Abigail Adams had watched the battle from a hill near her house. She wrote to her husband, John, "The spirits of the people are very good. The loss of Charleston affects them no more than a drop in the bucket." In January 1776, cannons dragged from Fort Ticonderoga and Crown Point by colonial soldiers, finally reached Boston. Soon, cannon fire poured into British camps in the city. In March, the British sailed out of Boston. I'm going to repeat that. In March, the British sailed out of Boston. Some seek compromise. As American colonists heard about these battles, they had to make a choice. Should they join the rebels or remain loyal to Britain? Many colonists wanted to end what they saw as British bullying. But not all colonists wanted to completely cut ties with Great Britain. They hoped that the British government would compromise. Some of these colonists worked to help the British government. Others feared that they might lose their property during the fighting. Still, others, called loyalists, simply did not want to separate from Great Britain. They thought that taxes and restrictions were not good reasons for rebellion. So again, we still have the colonists not fully in unison. We have some loyalists still supporting the king and Great Britain, and then we have some people that are completely against them, and then we have people in the middle. No turning back. Most colonists understood that a compromise would not be reached. They knew that once British soldiers were killed, the British government would not back down. But the events around Boston made colonists see themselves in a new way. They were no longer British citizens living in British colonies. They were citizens of a new country that was fighting to free itself from British rule. Patrick Henry declared this as the First Continental Congress. "I'm not a Virginian, but I'm an American.